Welcome to an exhilarating LinkedIn Live series, Leading in the Digital Era. In this rapidly evolving technological landscape, the abundance of information can be overwhelming, and the ability to adapt to constant change is crucial for effective leadership. Host Robert Field understands the importance of staying connected to people, customers, and evolving trends. In this series, Robert takes part in engaging discussions with top executives. Together, they unveil the secrets behind their successful transformation of leadership styles, enabling them to flourish amidst the frenzied pace of the digital era. As a LinkedIn Live session, this is your chance to gain invaluable insights and strategies to empower your own leadership. Feel free to share your comments and questions in the chat. This is Leading in the Digital Era, presented by the Institute for Digital Transformation.
Thanks, Frank. Hey, everyone, welcome back. Here, another great session we have here going for you with almost more than a century of leadership joining our call today. But before we start, I just want to let you guys know that there's a second show next week, our first back-to-back show with our first repeat guest. Next week, we're going to have a great change management session with 𝗡𝘃𝗶𝗴𝘁𝗲𝗄, Alex McBrantley, and coming back for a second visit will be Rita King from the Science House, and we're going to talk about what it's like to not have a crystal ball, but understand what it's like to lead with leadership and change management. But here today, I'm very honored to have three gentlemen I've known for a very long time. As a SIM member, Society for Information Management, there's a weekly call that Joe Puglisi and 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗁 have been running with Tom Sweet's support for many years to help members that are in transition, SIM members that are in transition, coaching them and supporting them and finding the next role. And many things that these gentlemen have been teaching and leading others that need this role are how to find that next opportunity. One thing that's always stuck with me from Joe is, when do you start looking for your next role? It's when the day you start your current role. Well, I'd like to invite these three gentlemen with me, and we're going to talk about, is it really important to stay in one industry, or can you lead successfully moving from industry to industry? So please, let's welcome Joseph Puglisi, 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗁, and Tom Sweet joining me today. And let's see how they feel about this topic. So welcome, gentlemen.
Great to be here. Thanks, Robert.
So before we get started, I just want to thank you guys for, I think, almost 15 years of friendship, of training, of education, of tutelage, and many, many sound bites I've used many times over. So thank you. And as you see, this is a live show. There'll be questions coming up in the chat. The chat is very, very exciting. And then while we have gone over some questions here, we really would prefer to have the engagement with the audience here. So nothing here is planned except for the first question, and then we'll go see where it goes from there. But thank you again for doing this for me, guys. I really appreciate it. And we'll get started if that's okay. So with that, you guys, then, we talked about 100 years of leadership on this call here. And if we could just start from your perspective, how have you seen challenges faced by IT departments evolve in various industries over the past decade? And Joe, if it's okay to start off with you, if you don't mind taking that question first.
No, not at all. That's fine, Robert. And by the way, great to be here, and great to be here with my friends and colleagues of many years. Although a century sort of makes us sound very old, you know.
Combined.
It's additive. That's how we get there. You know, the challenges, from my perspective, the challenges over time have gone horizontally and vertically. If you think about technology in modern day organizations, it is, first of all, pervasive, right? It cuts across all departments, at all levels in all departments, and touches virtually every aspect of an organization today in its operations. But secondly, it's gone vertical. It is a topic of discussion. It is the substance of strategy, the core of the business, in many cases, the business, from the mailroom to the boardroom. So the challenges have grown both horizontally and vertically, in my view.
Christopher, how about you?
Yeah, well, I always agree with Joe on the things he has to say on that, and this is true as well. You know, in talking about the change in industries, I've been in 4 different industries in that past decade, and 10 years ago, each industry had their custom applications and things that they were doing, and they tended to be unique. We still had a lot of on-premise back then, in-house IT, doing specialized things. Fast forward 10 years, right? And more companies, it's the norm to be in the cloud, right? Cloud-based applications, infrastructure, or anything that you could throw in at a service on the end of it. And what I think has happened because of that is that we've started to use a lot of common tools. Now you have to figure out if you're using, NetSuite or, lots of companies or SAP or whatever. How do I get a competitive advantage from that tool set that's generic and available to everybody in the industry? And so the knowledge that you need has changed as well. It's not about the specific thing you do, but how to leverage the common tools that everybody has access to.
I think that's a great point, Christopher. And as you point out, many of the solutions among the different companies, even across industries, are the same solution. NetSuite is a great example. SAP is pervasive, and there are so many others, Oracle's solutions. How do you get that edge, and how as the senior technology leader in the organization, how do you drive the business forward and separate them from the pack? It's a great point.
So Tom, how about you? What's the last 10 years for you?
Adding to what Joe said and Christopher, part of it, the big challenge is instilling a culture of continuous learning. When we have all these new technologies, it's hard to get people to hire them with that understanding. You have to take your existing staff and continue to grow them. But part of a job as a leader is to set that example, because people will look at the leader and what their leader does more than they listen to what their leader says. So as the CIO or a top leader in your organization, you need to set that example that you're always learning, you're always growing, and that'll help, filter down to your teams, because they're always going to keep learning, because there's always a new technology and there's always a competitive edge. And if you don't have it, someone else will.
It's a good point. And that continued learning and across the industry can pick up that industry knowledge in the role you're in. Christopher, for industries in 10 years is an accomplishment, right? Which I think most of us have been blessed enough to be successful in different industries. And I think some of that comes from building relationships within that organization as well. One thing in one of our last shows, Rita King joined us from the Science House, and Rita made a statement that we talk about digital transformation and being the Institute for Digital Transformation, that AI will be a great equalizer, where passion and drive and determination will be more important than industry knowledge, because you can get that industry knowledge from AI or generative AI, as we see now. And it wouldn't be a current event if we didn't talk about AI and what we're doing here. So how's the introduction of AI changed the landscape for us and what we do from a senior IT perspective? And we'll go with you on this one, Tom, first.
Sure, yeah. So my company, we design, build, and service industrial refrigeration systems. So we're really much a mechanical solutions organization, an engineering and construction organization. We're using a lot of AI for press releases, for content generation. It's really hard to get refrigeration technicians to help you write a web page, right? So if you can use AI to help generate that content, it goes a long way, because a lot of content creation just takes a lot of time, and many people, including myself, have writer's block. So it's not like we can just go write a 10-page article. So for us, where we're using it for content generation, for marketing, and that's really helped us a lot.
Joe, how about you?
Well, I think Tom's spot on, and something that was said earlier about being a learning organization and the adaptability of individuals is something that I've always valued, for as long as I've been a senior technology leader. I look more for drive, enthusiasm, and ability to learn and adapt than I do look at specific technology skills. AI is probably going to have an impact at all 3 levels, right? Operationally, We've already been using machine learning and other forms of early AI to help get the routine tasks done, automating administrative tasks and so on. From a tactical perspective, it is going to accelerate our ability to leverage the cloud more intelligently, control costs. And then, when we get up to boardroom level, AI is going to be a strategic weapon to help, as we said earlier, separate us from the pack and make our offering in our industry a little bit better than the next guys. So I see it operating on all three levels.
Christopher?
Yeah, and great points, Tom and Joe. The thing that I see in this is the acceleration. We've seen technology and the pace of business go fast, but in essentially a year, generative AI has captured the minds of everybody. We've always had the thing where the CEO read an article on the airplane and wanted to know what we were doing with that technology. Well, now it's not the CEO and it's not on the thing, it's in their face in everything they do. And so it's understanding how to manage some of that, because it's free, it's cheap now, right? Just go on, Bing search, and it's off there on the side now saying, ask your questions, start doing this. And we've heard the stories where, the lawsuit that made fictitious cases and things like that. So you need to do a lot of education as a leader in understanding where it's good and can be used and where, there might be some risk. Was it Samsung, right, with their leaked code into ChatGPT? And that was a big thing. One of the things that we did at FlexCar was start to use the Copilot for code development, right? So if you've got that simple thing, here's the base, but you really need to make sure that you're testing it and you understand it. And the real question longer term to me is, as these things come in, how much do we lose the ability to write it? I had a conversation with legal. Like, yeah, well, we used to write contracts and drafts and you would review them. So that's fine, because you had experience writing them when you review them. Now, if AI is writing them and you've never written one, do you have the right skills to actually evaluate what has been spit out is the right one? So I think there's a lot of challenges that we need to make sure we temper in the right places and enable in other places.
So it's still going to play a part in our role and hopefully potentially discount the need for that industry experience, but it'll also help augment what we do if we're using it in the right way. And I think embracing it and still keeping that open mindset for education on using it as well. It's not going to work without the human element. That's what the theme I think I've seen more over than not is where we're going. We are putting a show together for the future of AI, and we'll talk about auto GPT and after in early December. But
Robert, I actually just wanted to go back to something you said there, right, about
sure.
the working together. Right, I remember this is probably over 5 years ago, hearing a speech, and it was talking about doctors, and it was before the term AI, right? But that concept, and that a doctor was very good at looking, identifying heart attacks or whatever it was, and AI was, but together the combination of both of them was significantly better than either of them alone. So I think those are the things where it's the combination of human and machine.
I absolutely agree. I don't think one works without the other, and the exponential growth of it continues to show why the rate of change in technology requires this role, and the rate of change is helpful, I think, if you're able to focus on what you do and not where you come from. And so why do companies still emphasize having industry experience when moving into role? I personally haven't always hired based on industry, but hired on passion, on ability, on drive. Why are companies still asking for industry experience? And maybe we should have had someone from a recruiting company in our chat that can weigh in, or an HR person. But Chris, why do you think companies are still looking to hire from an industry specific role?
Yeah, I think it is just perception and what we know going back, and I think there are probably a few industries where knowing the industry is going to accelerate your getting up to speed and be able to deliver your time to value. I don't know anything about medical records or life sciences, and I think I would struggle just not even knowing the acronyms and having to get up to speed on that. So having that experience would be helpful. But I think a lot of others nowadays, as I mentioned before, of these as a services, and you just get the plug-in pack and NetSuite. Yes, okay, the plugin does this differently in manufacturing than it does in the services industry, but it's all the same. And it's really about the skills of managing those things. And you can bring that cross-industry experience, and depending on some of the jobs, maybe applications might be a little bit heavier versus an infrastructure, or even a CIO who's got to know the business and focus on that, and then have that niche expertise that you do still need to tweak those packages. You've got people there that can do that work for you. So I think it's less so in certain roles, but it could be a little bit more in other roles.
Joe, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, those of us that have moved among various industries certainly can cite lots of stories where the myth about having to know something specific about any particular industry is just that. It's just a myth. You can learn the business, you can learn the technology if you have a learning mindset. But quite often, what I've found is the more the industries think they're different, the more they're actually the same. They all have the same key concerns. You know, they're all looking to drive revenue, keep costs under control, get a competitive edge in the marketplace, build a good culture, achieve their core mission. I mean, these are things that every company does. To Chris's point about certain industries, regulated industries, for example, one has to know a little bit more when you're in the pharma world. But again, I crossed over into that and learned about validation. I didn't know a lot about it when I got there, but you know, it's essentially best practice around making sure that things are being done as they are documented, and documented as they're being done. I mean, you know, grossly simplified, but that's really all it's about. Not that hard to learn. I will tell you a quick story about working for a construction management firm. They ran the business on a custom report called an anticipated cost report. And it basically included the monies that I've paid out, monies that I've committed to pay but haven't paid yet, and then a sort of an estimate on what it's going to take to complete that particular trade. And they did that for all the trades. And so that report was sort of your guideline on how you're doing in terms of a construction project. Well, fast forward, and I go work for the reinsurance industry. And construction management and reinsurance, you would think, are completely different. And at my first big meeting, there was a discussion about IBNR. And the term IBNR was thrown around a few times. And I was, you know, had to sheepishly raise my hand and say, I'm not familiar with that particular acronym. What is IBNR? And the answer I got from the actuarial group was, oh, this is unique to the reinsurance industry. You know, nothing else like this anywhere else. This is claims we paid out, claims that we know we're going to pay, but we haven't paid yet, and then an estimate to what it's going to take to run out the balance of the policy. Well, it's an anticipated cost report. It's the same exact construct. So I've found this numerous times where transitioning from manufacturing to, pharmaceuticals, same concerns, different names, but it's all the same.
I used to call those, Joe, and in this case it's a 4, but a TLA, a 3-letter acronym that people just continue to hang their hat on. So, Tom, any thoughts on this one for you?
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot of difference between industries. I have, missed out on an opportunity because I didn't have the healthcare background and an understanding of possibly 100 different acronyms. And it's one of those things where they'll continue to look for months and months and months. But in that time period, I'm sure someone could have learned those acronyms if the person had everything else needed to be successful in the role.
We got a question from Dale here. So why, in your opinion, is the return to office philosophies we're seeing? Do we believe that some of the segments will succeed or fail because of this? So anyone want to jump on this one first? Joe, you look like you think you want to.
Yeah, I think this is the same old, same old. You know, if you're a fish in a fishbowl, you only know what the world looks like inside of a fishbowl. There is a mindset that if you're not in the office, you're not working. And I mean, it couldn't be further from the truth. Certainly, all of us, I'm sure, have walked around the office and observed people at their desks reading news on the screen, or perhaps visiting an online shop and purchasing Christmas gifts, or things of that sort. And people at home, studies have shown, are actually more productive in many cases. So I think it's just more of the same. The mindset of management in certain companies is if you're not here, you're not working, and you can't change that perception in their minds.
Chris?
I'll jump in as well. I don't disagree with you, Joe, but I think some of the things that are missing out is that after the meeting, the water cooler conversation you talk about. My daughter, who just graduated and has joined the workforce, she actually wants to be in the office because she's picking up the little things that she wouldn't, sitting in the conference room after the meeting and talking to her boss, and did you see what happened there or whatever, and those types of things, or just overhearing, while you're having coffee, what are you working on, that you wouldn't necessarily get. So I think the companies that are going to get the most value are those that figure out the right hybrid type of model that lets people have the freedom, doesn't enforce you have to be here these number of days or whatever, but figures out how to do some of that engagement. You can talk about all you want of the videos and all of these things. You lose a little bit when you're not face to face. And so I think that has to happen sometimes. It's just a matter of figuring out what the right mix is, because you're not going to get the best talent if you say it's 5 days a week in New York City anymore, right? Or Boston or wherever.
Yeah, and I agree,
Tom,
Christopher, that the face-to-face and the socializing is important. But let me go back to my 𝗏𝗃 days. 𝗏𝗃 was comprised of, at the outset, over 30, and by the time I left in 2011, there were over 75 companies. And at each of those operating companies, there were anywhere from 1 to 3 full-time IT staff members who were under my direction. And so we weren't all together all the time. In fact, we weren't together very much at all, but we managed to maintain those relationships. I think there's a certain skill set that allows you to build and maintain relationships without that physical presence. Now, having said that, I did hold the first IT summit and quite literally brought at least one IT member from every company together, so that we spent 2 days together in Austin, Texas, and really got to know each other, shake hands, and break bread together. And there's a certain amount of that you absolutely have to do to build the culture and build the working relationships. But I think we've learned, certainly through the COVID era, we've learned how to work remote pretty effectively, and I'm very comfortable doing it.
Hey, Tom, how about you? What about this RTO?
In addition to everything they said, the other piece is somewhat political. Companies have got tax credits to move offices to certain regions, and the part of the agreement is people will be in the office, they'll contribute to the community, they'll buy gas, they'll buy food, and when that's not happening, or companies have leased several different buildings and people walk around and the buildings are empty, it's like, why are we leasing these buildings if no one's in them? So I think that's part of it, and it can be a little challenging when the hybrid model is one where if you live within an hour of the office or within 2 hours of the office, we expect you in. But if we hired you and you're 6 hours away, you can still work remote. The people who live an hour away have to come in. And I know of one company that's working through that right now, and it's a little awkward because they committed to a remote workforce, then they changed their mind, and there's a lot of unhappy employees that are involved in that situation right now.
So I actually have a real thought process around here, and I think that the return to office has to have a cascading effect down from the owners of organizations who need to change KPIs on how companies how people and companies decide how we move forward and whatnot, and maybe return to office is only for 3 days a week or not, so on, but getting together on in person and building relationships outside of IT throughout the organization is really, really critical. Until we figure out a way how to do that, I don't think companies can really, really be successful. And I've been working with you guys for a long time, but my first time I met with you, Chris, was a very big hug right in the middle of Manhattan. And I still think you can't exchange that hug for something real. So I hope we figure out sometime, but we will have a show on this in the future. So here's another question we have out here. Considering generative AI and the ingest data from industry and public availability data, is it fair to foresee that Gen AI will soon leverage information cross-cutting various industries to provide inferences and insights? So this is a great question, Ashish, and I love bringing back this cross-industry information. And when you think about AutoGPT coming out that takes that ingest of data coming from elsewhere, and you get into more public data being available. And this kind of brings us to our follow-up question from this, which would be about using information from other industries to here. So anyone want to jump onto this Gen AI and grabbing data from other industries to help you guys? So Joe, you want to take this one first?
Sure. Cross-industry information where it's common. Let's talk about, I don't know, administrative rules or expense management, perhaps. Maybe there's some industry information that could be, or some information that could be gleaned across industries. But I think, as we said earlier, it's more likely that the cross-industry pollination of Gen AI is going to be substituting the need for industry information and perhaps bringing some new perspectives into it. Gen AI is good at digesting and regurgitating, but it's not good at being imaginative or creative. I think the creativity still has to come from the human elements. So I guess I'm on the fence on this one. I'm not sure.
As Rita would say, applied imagination is what AI should stand for. But Christopher, you want to jump on this one?
Yeah, this is something Joe said there about what it brings to it, but you need the imagination. I mentioned before, right, that AI, Gen AI, whatever, works a lot better when it's partnered with a human. What I think will happen is Gen AI in general, doesn't know necessarily that this is an industry-specific question they're asking, depending on how you ask the question. And so it searches its whole knowledge base and pulls back from any place that it could find something that it deems to be germane. I think that power is that it will open up different ideas that you may never have thought of if you went and only searched industry websites or journals or things like that, versus getting a response back that has looked through the whole universe of potential opportunities. Right? Again, it comes back to, you can't just let it run crazy on its own. But if you're using the general AI space, maybe it's going to be coming up with some things you hadn't thought about before.
And right before we go to Tom, though, Ricardo pumped up a great question there. AI should work for you, not think for you. I mean, a great mantra. So that's a real good one, Ricardo. Thank you. Tom, you want to go on this one?
Yeah, following up on what Christopher said, we also have to be careful that we're not getting the wrong information and going down the wrong path, because it's pulling ideas that we've never heard of. And the reason we've never heard of them, and they're not appropriate for our particular use case. So we just always have to be careful, just like what we just said earlier about making up a legal case. And I think the lawyer was disbarred, but the lawyer got in some trouble for quoting a case that didn't even exist. So you got to be very careful with stuff like that.
Right. I mean, you still have to check your work, right? We're not there yet, and I don't know when we will be there with AI. But how about non-AI? Let's go back to basic brick and mortar. And in your careers as leaders, have you brought stuff from other industries into another industry that's helped you by not having that specific industry experience, but brought it back from something in your past? Where have you seen that be helpful, being a cross-industry leader? So, Tom, you want to start this one off?
Sure, like definitely software development practices, DevOps pipelines. I was working at a company several back, and we were building pipelines and deploying virtual machines in the cloud. And when I went to the next company, I was able to take a lot of those concepts and rebuild them. And so technology is often agnostic between companies. So yeah, it is pretty easy to do.
how about you?
I think I brought a practice of putting the B before the T. Many of you know the old story. Whenever I've been put in charge of an IT department, I changed the name from IT to BT, and that stands for business technology. The B comes before the T. And I sort of beat this into the staff's heads. Get out and understand what the business is about, because you do need to understand the business needs in order to bring the right technology solutions to the business. Had a conversation with one of my EDI experts at a more recent post I had, and we were debating about a particular thing that he was working on with the EDI processing, and I said, that's not how it's done. And he said, yeah, it is. And I said, no, it isn't. And he said, yeah, it is. And he'd been there 7 years, and I'd been there, I think, 2 at that point. And so I said to him, well, when was the last time you were down the factory floor? And he said, I've never been to the plant. And like my head exploded. Okay, I couldn't fathom it. And so I said, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, you're going for a plant tour. And I brought him down to the facility where the manufacturing actually occurred and literally gave him a tour of the plant. I'd been through it numerous times, understood how everything worked. And it was a real eye opener for him. So I think that discipline of whatever industry you're in, know how it works, is important, and getting folks out of the computer room and into the plant is critical.
Chris, any thoughts?
I absolutely agree. I take every chance I get to be out on the front line and seeing what we're doing. We have a field operation that's between here and Boston, where I commute a couple days a week. And I would stop there in the morning and spend a couple hours just watching what they're doing to see, where it is. And if I look, back, I've been in commercial building management, aircraft management, vehicle management. Pretty soon I'm going to be managing bicycles, I think, at that trend. But, they're all different industries and have their different things, but they're all about managing assets. And one of the things that I was able to bring across between them, and when you manage airplanes, maintenance and making sure and tracking it, there's even regulatory stuff to it, but it's critical for that asset, right? So I come now to a vehicle management company, and it's about how much we can keep that vehicle on the road, because if it's not on the road, we're not generating revenue from it. And so all those robust systems that I had for managing aircraft, I brought the same concept, not the same systems, obviously, but the same concept, and said, look, the more we can be predictive, we can use data out of the vehicles, know when something's going to fail, so we fix it before it fails, and manage the service, we're going to deliver value. And we did, because the cars were more available to be used, and customers were less upset when they had a failure. So, and believe me, airplane customers get really upset when there's a failure, right? So, putting that mindset into it, not something I ever would have thought of maybe if I'd come just from the automotive space.
So Bill's popping up a good question, and it lends to and maybe we should address it, because Christopher, you're driving to your office in Boston, you stop for 4 hours somewhere or make that stop on the way to do it. That takes a certain amount of, it takes a mindset, it takes a dedication, it takes a commitment. Doesn't matter what industry you come from, you can apply that to any industry. But those that are working within your organization, you have an impact to. How, to Bill's question, how do you get the individual contributors to take that constant learning, the dedication, the commitment, the curiosity to take that next step? What are you as leaders doing to make sure that they take on that same type of approach you're taking, Chris?
Yeah, it's really showing ultimately what we're about. To Joe's point, the B, right? B before the T. I don't necessarily use that terminology, but it's what's the North Star of the company, right? What are we achieving? What is we're trying to do as a business? And everything we do needs to support that. And if you don't know what the people are doing or what that North Star of the company is, how can you make a decision on what you're working on is supporting that goal? So it's just critically important to understand the business to then be able to make sure we're working on the right things. Because everybody gets up and says, oh my gosh, I had too much work, too many requests, too many tickets, too many whatever. Well, you have to prioritize. How do you prioritize? It's based on knowing the business. So I really encourage the team to go and sit with and watch and come up with ideas, as simple as, hey, I could write a macro in that Excel, help you write a macro in Excel to do that instead of you manually copying and pasting these things, right? Then they see that they've added value and people want to come back to them for more. And I think that just becomes self-perpetuating.
Christopher, I think you are so spot on. It's recognition. I'm something of a turnaround guy. I typically go into underperforming or dysfunctional IT organizations, and I tune them up. And I'll talk about one of the more recent engagements where the IT department had a really bad reputation. I mean, they were just a bunch of flunkies down the hall that nobody ever wanted to talk to, and they even thought poorly of themselves. But through the leadership, we were able to turn things around. We effectively upgraded an ERP, both in the hardware and the software level, and restored the reputation of the department. In fact, after that glorious weekend when we pulled it off exactly on schedule and as we had planned, the system was really humming that Tuesday morning, and we were walking down the hall, a few of us from the department, and somebody yelled out, "There goes the dream team." Well, let me tell you, that little showering of glory on us was a real boost. And if you give people the appropriate incentives and recognition, they rise to the challenge, or at least I've always found they do.
Tom, how about you?
So I have a couple ideas on this. I mean, when you look at, I'm looking at it from an upskilling of technical skills specifically. I've had contests where I've been able to create different programs for self-learning and assign points, and then give people trips to Microsoft Ignite. And as part of a weekly report, sharing, who's been successful, having personal recognition around that intellectual stimulation, but also including myself as what my own learning was, again, demonstrating, by example, that I'm also part of that continuous upskilling journey. And that was really helpful, because not only did I invite my own teams to it, I invited other people's teams to participate, and it really lifted up the organization. And one organization I work with, we earned over 500 cloud certification, and that doesn't mean that every single person is a cloud expert, but it did demonstrate there was a lot of learning, a lot of excitement, and a lot of growth. And those are opportunities to then take advantage of that excitement to transform different business initiatives through technology.
Thanks, Tom. I think that's actually a great question, especially working on the individual contributors. And there are two great books I've read that have always helped them. One's called Mindset, which helps you getting a learning mindset. One's called Leading Without Authority. And I usually give those to those, you always have a different plan for everyone that works for you. Treat everyone equally, but differently, because everyone learns or needs to grow in their own way. And giving them the opportunity to learn and grow at their rate for the direction they want to go is important. But those two books have been instrumental in me in helping the people that work for me figure out what their path is and give them the tools that they need to be successful, because that's really what we need to know how to do. There was a really good question that popped up by, I hope I say it right, 𝗶𝗴. Thank you. And I'd like to tie it a little bit into what we're talking about here by cross-industry specifics, especially around the high priorities around cybersecurity, considering that on every board's mind, cybersecurity is either 2 or 3, maybe even 1 in some cases, on the most important things on their board reports. But from my perspective, when you look at the SEC asking you to report now on cybersecurity breaches, and the DoD has been asking you to do that now for years, 24 hours for the DoD. I'm not sure if it's four days for public companies, but what are some of the challenges you guys see, especially from cross-industry, where cybersecurity is really industry agnostic for the most part in most areas? Where do you see cybersecurity as an impact across these, that help you within your organization, cross-organizational, cross-industry boundaries? So, Tom, you want to start off with that one?
So I think the number one challenge everyone's seeing right now is business email compromise. I mean, last week, I think Boeing got hit, Mr. Cooper got hit, Ace Hardware got hit, and these are all great companies, large companies with cybersecurity teams that probably work very hard and are very skilled. Yet it's challenging, and you're sometimes the failure point is just a single person in the organization who clicks on a link or maybe doesn't have all that understanding. And as IT professionals, there's a lot of things that we take for granted, but many of the business users just still lack common cybersecurity awareness. And that's a challenge in every industry right now. And that's one of the ones that I'm mostly focusing on. And it's hard to always, work through different audit reports or different cybersecurity insurance questionnaires and continue to chip away at it. And you just can't sit there and say, we're going to have an IT department of 100 people and we need another 130 just for security, right? It doesn't always work that way. You have to continue to make money as a company without spending every single dime on cybersecurity. So it's just finding that balance and finding where the risks are and measuring those risks appropriately. But business email compromise, I think, is number one for most companies right now.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Tom.
I mean, interesting. I think the question kind of talked about the mid-sized enterprise. So, if you're in the SEC and you got to do all of these things, well, those things don't necessarily apply if you're not a public company, but they're equally as important. And it becomes very important to stress to the management team and your colleagues that, hey, this is what could happen if we don't do something right. We have people's private information. We need to protect it. As Tom said, business email compromise and former company got hit. Somebody clicked on the link and injected some emails in or whatever. So you've got to put those processes in. But I think the most important thing we can do is bring education to the table. Right? And I think the large companies, they got programs because guess what? They're being certified and audited and all of these things. I think the missing point is at the smaller companies, and those who are going to attack us know, where to go after it, and they can keep chugging away, $100,000 here or something like that. It suddenly adds up to some real money. So I think we, particularly as we work in the SME, MES space, that we need to figure out how to make sure education about the risk, because you can get those basics. You can get people to realize that this is a problem email and do that. But the rest of it, configuring your Azure storage buckets correctly, it all comes back to education and having the time, because we're never going to get the right resources.
Joe, you want to wrap this one up?
So this is where I think generative AI and AI technologies are both miraculous on the one hand and monsters on the other hand, because they can be used to help ferret out those phishing expeditions. They can help track what's going on your network. But at the same time, in the hands of bad actors, the quality and the appearance of these phishing emails are just beyond detection. They're so authentic that they're going to fool more and more people. The mid-sized companies have a particular challenge in, I think, 2 or 3 areas. One being that the budgets tend to be a little bit more constrained because the overall company budgets are a little bit smaller. And number 2, it's hard to attract, retain qualified staff. Staffing is a real challenge today, despite the fact that there seem to be millions of job opportunities listed on LinkedIn every day. Finding the right people seems to still be a challenge. So I think those are some of the issues.
So just jump into Joe's point about finding the right people and Tom's earlier point about learning. I think it's incumbent on us as leaders to make sure that we're constantly learning. I'm a little forced to. A number of years ago, I was forced to get my CISM certification for a role I had, but I've now kept it up. And so I am listening to the webcast and security and reading the articles and all of these things, which it means I've got awareness of where it's going that can help do it, because I don't have a dedicated CISO. I don't have that luxury in a smaller company, right? So I've got to do it and embed some of that into some of the other people who are managing the systems. When I see a webinar, or webcast, or an article, to share it down to them, even in the technology community, as well as colleagues in the business.
Well, Christopher, I think that's critical, right? You know, through 𝘚, through 𝗡𝘃𝗃𝗍, through the peers, which crosses industries constantly. That opportunity to learn from us, regardless of the industry you're in, is critical. And I think that's where I get most of my education from conversation with you guys. And, you know, this week we'll be at an Inspire event the next 2 days, but that education, I think, can't be replaced by almost anything we go out and see, especially from our peers. We did have a question about what are the hottest stuff for 2030 and beyond, but I'm going to ask us to hold off on that one. We do have a show coming up on the future of technology and AI with some really, really amazing guests that I'll announce in the next couple of days in the beginning of December. Thank you, Dale. But stay tuned for that show. So like and follow us and you'll see. But I do have a question, and I'd like to just put a plea out, because this will be streamed on YouTube after. So our last couple of questions, though, especially this one, and we talked earlier about how to battle the stigma of, you know, being hired for a role that is, you know, or how do we approach those roles when you don't have experience in an industry. So when you're battling the stigma, what's the most common misconception about IT leaders who have experience in multiple industries, and how do we effectively address these misconceptions during an interview or discussions? How do we make people feel more comfortable about that? So I like people to have some stuff they can take away with actual things they can use in those experiences. So if you guys who have success in crossing those industries can give our listeners, and for those who are watching can leave in the chat, or maybe some recruiters or people in HR can leave some questions or some comments or advice for us in the comments as well, that would really be helpful. So Joe, if you can start and lead us out of chaos on this one, I'd really appreciate it.
Sure. So, you know, I think the conversation has to be in a common language of business. It's at the end of the day, it comes down to dollars and cents. What is the mission of this organization? How is it funded? What are the sources of revenue? How do we drive that? How do we contain our costs? How do we keep our people happy and engaged? How do we continuously train, to Christopher's point? How do we elevate the knowledge and experience of our people? The conversation when you're vying for a leadership role should be about how you plan to lead, and not necessarily looking back at how you led in other industries and different industries, but how you plan to lead in this one. And I think leadership is the key quality.
Thanks, Joe. Tom?
I would include handling of the objection before it's been asked. So during your conversations, if you've worked in other industries prior, demonstrate through your conversation that the experience you brought from industry A to industry B crossed over, and also get the interviewer to agree that the leadership components, the value delivery components, the understanding of the business impact is far greater than necessarily the industry. So again, try to handle the objection before it's asked. That way the interviewer doesn't ask the question, because he or she's already been answered indirectly.
Good idea. Christopher?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Tom. However, I think that we find a lot of cases we don't even get the chance to have that conversation with an interviewer because you're screened out beforehand. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, short of using your network and finding a way in and having an advocate, you're not going to get past that. As all of you at least know, and some on the call do, I'm currently in transition looking for my next role. And I've had two different roles that came up and wanted industry specific experience. Now, in both of these cases, I'm fortunate that there's a recruiter involved who is engaged directly with the hiring team. And so they've been able to be my mouthpiece, whereas some of the other things I never would have gotten there. And what I've been able to stress in there is that what are you trying to achieve? What's the biggest challenge? And then bring what experience do I have that might be relevant from another thing, something that I could apply into the same industry. Yes, I've implemented financial systems, and that's a problem. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, it's a financial system. it's going to take some time to learn in an industry while you're looking at the job, but you have to deep dive into the industry and what the company challenges are so that you can bring the right things. And, I've got one of the companies that actually is a startup, and they're like, well, we need logistics experience. And I said, well, yeah, I don't have that, but I manage logistics of airplanes and cars and moving them around and making sure they don't get lost and whatnot. So I kind of understand what that is, but your real challenge is you're a startup. How are you going to move quickly? You want to go public, so you need to have the right controls and experience in that space. And that's what I bring to the table for you. And it's really understanding what that challenge is that they're trying to do and show how what you've done helps to solve that problem, right? It's not, what do I want? It's what, as Joseph Puglisi always says, what do you need? And how can I help to solve your problem?
Thanks, guys. And that's fantastic. And please, those who are listening and participating, all the questions, all the comments ongoing, this is going to be a real helpful resource for people. So before I ask the last question, guys, this stuff that you just brought here to this one in the last more than a decade that you've been teaching me and advising me on this, I'm truly appreciative. And a lot of the show started with Tom's desire to get on screen a while ago and sort of blaze the trail for all of us. But it's not only me that learns from you guys. So I think for me, especially knowing what you guys have done with your career as servant leaders and giving to everyone, I'd like to know, as we round this out, for our inspiring IT leaders, for those who are coming up through the ranks, what advice would you give them that are looking to diversify their experience and take leadership roles across industries? You constantly give that advice every week. You run those calls, that same MIT call. So how can we help make them better prepared for their growth in these industries and be able to land those jobs across industry? So, Tom, you ready to kick our last question off?
Sure. It's not who you know, it's who knows you. So take advantage of the different meetup groups in your area, different professional organizations. You can write blog articles for different executive recruiting organizations to send in their newsletter. You can create your own YouTube channel. You can create content on LinkedIn, Twitter, GitHub, and just make yourself visible and be seen as a positive influence in the world. And the more people you know, the easier it is going to be able to, the easier it'll be for you to go to the next level. I mean, that's how I got there. I got my CIO job by a referral. So,
thanks, Tom. Christopher?
Yeah, I agree, right? It's about who knows you. That's a great point, Tom. I think for younger leaders and Inspire, you need to kind of take a look and say, am I one, for example, in an industry like publishing that maybe isn't the growing industry anymore, or something in AI or life sciences that maybe are growing, right? And so then you can define, I want to go into an adjacent one, or I want to shift completely. I think even more important is to get that experience in other areas of the business as well, right? To step out into an operations role or something like that. And maybe that means taking a lateral move or things like that. But understand, every move you make, how does that ultimately get you to the goal that you want to get to, right? It's not about, did I get a promotion in this job? Did I get additional skills that are going to make me more valuable for the job I want to get to? As an example, back when I worked at 𝗏𝗵𝗴𝗁 Wakefield, I was leading our facility management business, and Craig, our CEO, came and said, our CIO came and said, hey, I'd like you to go into the security team. And at the time, we had like one consultant in security. And I scratched my head and said, what? But I also said, I want to be a CIO, and in that head seat, understanding security is going to only be more important going forward. So this is a skill that's going to add value. So look at what's going to be important going forward and what skills you're going to get by making that next move.
Thanks, Christopher. And Joe, if anyone doesn't know the phrase, the day you start looking for your next role, the day you start your current role, because you've beat it into everyone's head for the last 15 years or so, what kind of advice are you going to have for our future leaders?
Well, you already talked about networking and people that know you. It's more important than who you know. Getting out there, being active in social media, posting stories, write a blog, be visible at conferences, any number of ways that you could be out there. My best advice is to figure out ways of getting out of your comfort zone. Figure out how to operate outside of the places where you normally operate, whether that means getting up on a stage and singing, for example, do a karaoke night. If you can learn to operate outside your comfort zone, moving to a new industry will be a walk in the park.
Well, that's great advice, Joe. And anyone who heard Joe say that and wants to do one of these shows, please reach out to us, because we're always happy to have you here, because this is not part of my comfort zone. I just want to do this to make sure that you could meet guys like Tom, Christopher, and Joe, because they've been a tremendous asset in my life. And I don't know where I'd be without them, but I'm appreciative of them every day. And their friendship and relationship I've had with them for, again, more than a decade is truly appreciated. So guys, thank you for being here today. Thank everyone in the comments. We look forward to seeing you on next show. I did talk about the next Leading the Digital Era at the height of the show, but I just want to bring up next Tuesday, we do have a digital dialogue, which will be interesting, because our newest member of the Institute, Nora Osmond, is going to be hosting a show around the impact of AI legislation that just came out from the White House, which will be a very interesting conversation. So please tune in noon for that next Tuesday. You come see Rita, Stephanie, and Alex next Wednesday. And, maybe I could trick these guys into coming back again at the end for the holiday season, or sometime next year to talk about another way to help broaden your career with these three brilliant minds here. So thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great week, everyone.
Thanks for joining Leading in the Digital Era, hosted by Robert Field. Look for more Leading in the Digital Era, presented by the Institute for Digital Transformation, coming to a LinkedIn Live session soon. Can't join Robert for the live session? You can catch the replay anytime on our YouTube channel.